Hello, my name is Jake Kramer, and welcome to my Sprint 8 YouTube update. I'm going to be talking about our team's division of work. Next, I'm going to be demoing the features of our app from this last sprint. Next, I'm going to go onto GitHub and talk about some of the check-ins I made and highlight that code. Then I'm going to go on to Team Gantt and discuss some of the tasks that I had for this sprint and basically what is the future of our app after. So, without further ado, this is our division of work for this week. So I worked on adding a new pod, and that ended up being a screen, and then other miscellaneous screen tasks such as figuring out how our app can update after making Firestore changes, and just some general styling as well. Brandon worked a little bit on every screen, so the edit pod info screen, edit profile, meal history and rating, and the add meal plans screens. Max worked on the edit meal plan details screen, and then Isaiah and Alexis did not need to work on anything this week and opted to help with the final presentation for finals week. So we'll go ahead and now demo our code or demo our application. So the first change that you'll see in this app is just a general quality of life update to the app. It looks a lot cleaner. The header is now consistent for all dashboard screens. I can go ahead and create a meal pod now. This, I'm actually quite proud of this. So what was going to be 4 screens now is 1. So let's say I want to make a meal pod with maybe one of my best friends. So Jake plus Alexis. Write a description. Best friends meal pod. And then if I want to go ahead and add a user, I can go ahead and do it here. A Gax. I can search for her, and it will appear on the screen here. And if I save it, it will say that the meal pod is created, and it will automatically update the calendar, which is super awesome. It will even do this if we want to create a meal plan as well. So write an entree, perhaps tortilla soup. And I'll just say it's a Kramer family secret. Shh. Go ahead and set the date for perhaps just a couple days in advance. Let's say 6:15 is fine. We'll confirm that. And if we save it, it will go ahead and add that meal pod to the screen automatically, which is just super awesome. Yeah, and that is a overview of the main features for this sprint. I'll go ahead and go to GitHub and talk about some of my commits. These features, I could summarize these features in 3 main commits. So we'll discuss each one in order. First one being solved case of screen not updated. Solved case of screen not updating after making Firestore changes. So one problem we encountered was that once React Native mounted our screen, it would only run component did mount once. If we ever navigated back to the screen, so backwards in the navigation stack, it would not recall Firestore, since the components are already mounted. It thinks, why would we need to mount them again? So what React Native navigation has actually is listeners. So what you can do is you can add a listener, and there are different types of listeners. This one happens to be a focus listener, which basically tells React Native whenever this screen comes into focus. So whenever this screen is in the front, So it doesn't matter if you're navigating backwards or forwards. Um, React Native will listen to when this screen pops up in front of the user, which was perfect because when we're navigating backwards, we're basically putting the screen into focus. So disregarding these is-mounted variables, it would then, the screen would set the state of loading to, it would set the screen loading to true, because once you navigated back, it would spin the wheel again, because it would demonstrate to the user that changes are being made, and then it would recall Firestore to get the user's associations to meal pods and display them, basically updating the screen. I encountered like a challenge where every time I saved, I would get warnings saying that it tried to mount, or it tried to render an unmounted component, or I don't quite remember, but apparently every time you save on React Native, it unmounts your screen. And so because I guess React Native was so fast, it was trying to remount, or it was trying to re-render something that was unmounted. I'd rather tell React Native to wait until that asset is remounted before it even tries. So got a little clever there. And this also has to do with it, right? Because once the component is unmounted, you don't need to say that it's mounted anymore. Second commit. So implemented changing and uploading a new meal pod to Firestore. There's going to be, this is a dense amount of code here. But basically, I chose to have the front end be the main hub for changing our screen's state. So we have many text inputs for setting the pod name, setting the description, and updating a member list in our state. And basically, the back-end code doesn't execute until you press the save button. And there's quite a lot that happens once you press the save button. First of all, any members that you had selected in the front end, it would create, it would create a member and add it to the state. It would create these members, it would create these data objects from these templates I have up here. Because we're creating a meal pod, I have a meal pod template. Because every meal pod has an admin, I have an admin template, and all meal pods also have members. And it could be more than one. So that's why I basically call this function for however many members I choose to add. And it will update a state array to add them. Then next what I do is I get all users. This is for the searchable dropdown that I mentioned a couple sprints ago. So now first we add a meal pod to Firestore. So we occupy that meal pod template with our data. Once it's uploaded to Firestore, we now have the ID of that meal pod. So now we can add the admin to Firestore and occupy its meal pod ID with the ID of the meal pod we just created. Next, once that is uploaded to Firestore, we'll use that admin's ID and add it to the pod's array of admins. And then we'll redo that process for every member. So we'll add the new member to Firestore, and then we'll also occupy its mealpod ID field with that mealpod ID from the mealpod we made. And then once that member is created, we take its ID and we add that ID to the mealpod's list of member IDs. It sounds may sound complicated, but trust me, it works. And then here's our render member button for when we add a new one to the screen. So, and then finally, in my last commit, just some improved general style. I improved the general style of the application. So that included the header. For a lot of these screens, I changed the header back title. Sometimes the back button said dashboard. It looked like a really big button, looked kind of wonky. So by default, React Native will set that text to be the word back instead of the screen's name if you just set it to an empty string, which looks much cleaner. For some of these screens, I updated the status bar so that the status bar is actually visible behind that white header. Also looks more professional. And then some styling so that I'd be able to add the header to each of the dashboard screens. And that about sums up the quality of life and styling update. So finally, I'm going to go into Team Gantt and talk about those tasks. So adding a new pod. So I didn't really separate this between front end and back end. I actually did this in like 2 programming sittings, which occupied most of my time, or like dedicated an entire half of the sprint cycle to this feature. I'm actually still really proud of it, and that it works well and it looks good. So that came out to 6 hours, and then miscellaneous tasks involved updating the meal plan hours on the calendar. I kind of forgot to go over that code, but basically right here, just an easier way to format time and get around the issue of time zones. Re-render the screen on navigating back whenever there are Firestore changes. Finish that, and then general app styling also did that. So that comes out to a total of 6.88 hours plus 6.22 hours. Well, 6 plus 6, that's at least 12 hours. So we have at least, it looks like 13 hours for this sprint cycle. And I'm really happy to see where the app is and just how much we've worked on it. I'm just really proud of the product that we were able to build and what we were able to accomplish. So with that, there are no more sprint cycles. So the next plan is to work on our final presentation. So with that, thank you for attending my YouTube update, and I'll see you in class. Thank you.